The sky over the demon realm bled a deep crimson as the final fortress crumbled into ash. Thousands of golden-winged warriors descended from the clouds with spears of pure light. At the center of the carnage stood Lucille, the demon lord, his armor cracked and stained with ichor. He swung his massive blade, shattering the incoming holy projectiles with a single defiant roar. Beside him, his most trusted captain Kale prepared a final devastating spell. Without warning, Kale turned his hand and drove a dagger made of light into Lucille's back. Lucille coughed up dark blood as the holy poison instantly began to dissolve his soul. Kale whispered that the era of demons was over and that he had struck a deal with the heavens. As the angels closed in for the kill, Lucille used the last of his life force to activate a forbidden reincarnation seal. He vowed that if he were to return, he would hunt down every traitor and god responsible for this day. Darkness swallowed everything as his physical form disintegrated into 1,000 black butterflies. Suddenly, the smell of sulfur was replaced by the scent of cheap ramen and stale air. A young man named Hiroto Ajima jolted awake in a small, cramped apartment in modern Tokyo. He looked at his hands, finding them thin and pale, instead of the clawed gauntlets he remembered. A dusty mirror in the corner revealed the face of a teenager who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Scattered across the floor were bills and a hunter identification card marked with a bold red F. In this world, gates had appeared decades ago, bringing monsters and the humans who hunt them. Hiroto was known as the Eternal Loser, an F-rank hunter with zero potential and no special skills. Lucille, now inhabiting Hiroto's body, felt the pathetic trickle of mana within his new veins. He realized that this body was so weak that even a common goblin could end his life in seconds. His thoughts were interrupted by a loud ringing from his cracked smartphone. It was a call from a low-level raid party leader demanding he show up for a dungeon clearing or lose his pay. Lucille decided that he needed resources to regain his strength and accepted the mission. Walking to the designated gate, he noticed how people looked at him with pity and contempt. A group of C-rank hunters laughed as he approached, making jokes about his flimsy equipment. Lucille ignored them, his ancient soul burning with a pride they couldn't possibly understand. The raid leader, a burly man named Sato, told Hiroto to stay in the back and just carry the luggage. He was handed several heavy packs filled with supplies and spare weapons. As the party stepped through the shimmering blue portal, the atmosphere shifted to cold, damp air. They emerged into a dark cave system illuminated by glowing mushrooms and crystals. The sound of clicking claws echoed from the shadows ahead, signaling the presence of monsters. A pack of oversized rats with jagged teeth lunged at the front line of the party. Lucille watched the hunter struggle against creatures he would have once killed with a thought. He began to analyze the flow of mana in this world, noticing how it differed from his own realm. A sudden notification appeared in his field of vision, flickering like a digital screen. The screen read, "System initializing, Soul of the Demon Lord detected." It proceeded to list his stats, all of which were at rock bottom except for his hidden life force. A cruel smile finally touched Hiroto's lips as he realized the system would help him reclaim his power. Suddenly, the ground shook violently and a roar 10 times louder than the rats erupted from deeper in the dungeon. The party leader turned pale, screaming that this was supposed to be an E-rank dungeon, but that sound belonged to something much worse. A pair of massive, glowing red eyes opened in the darkness of the tunnel ahead of them. The hunters began to retreat in a panic, leaving the luggage and Hiroto behind in their haste to escape. Hiroto did not move, feeling a strange resonance between his soul and the approaching beast. The system chimed again, issuing a sudden mandatory quest: survive the encounter. As the massive shadow lunged toward him, Hiroto reached out his hand, wondering if his new body would break or awaken. The massive beast's claws tore through the air just inches from Hiroto's trembling chest. He tried to summon the dark mana of his past life, but his current veins felt like they were filled with cold lead. Around him, the other low-rank hunters screamed as the dungeon's traps began to click into place. A young girl beside him tripped over a loose stone, her eyes wide with the realization of her impending end. Hiroto lunged forward to grab her hand, his F-rank muscles screaming under the sudden exertion. Suddenly, a heavy iron gate slammed down, separating the survivors from the doomed. The impact of the gate's vibrations sent Hiroto reeling back against a jagged wall. From the darkness of the sealed chamber, hundreds of glowing red eyes began to multiply. The F-rank party leader dropped his sword, the sound of steel hitting stone echoing like a funeral knell. Hiroto refused to accept that a former demon lord would perish in such a pathetic hole. He threw himself at the nearest monster, a jagged goblin-like creature with rusted blades. A blade pierced Hiroto's shoulder, the sensation of cold steel biting deep into his flesh. He fell to his knees, his vision blurring as the blood loss began to take its toll. The monsters closed in, their guttural laughter filling the air like a sick symphony. Everything went silent as a massive blow from a club crushed the remaining life from his chest. For a moment, Hiroto floated in a vacuum of nothingness where time and space ceased to exist. A holographic window flickered into existence before his astral eyes, glowing with a forbidden light. The system announced that the Demon Lord's core had been successfully integrated into the F-rank vessel. A notification for a unique skill named Eternal Resurrection began to pulse in bright crimson. Back in the dungeon, Hiroto's broken body began to twitch as purple lightning danced across his skin. The monsters backed away in confusion, sensing a power far greater than any mere hunter. Hiroto's eyes snapped open, no longer human, but burning with the cold fire of the abyss. He stood up slowly, the sound of his bones knitting back together echoing through the chamber. With a simple wave of his hand, a shockwave of necrotic energy blasted the surrounding monsters into the walls. He felt the familiar weight of authority returning to his soul as the F-rank shackles shattered. He picked up a discarded blade and it turned pitch black as it absorbed his corrupting mana. In a blur of motion, he moved through the monster horde, leaving nothing but dust in his wake. The girl he tried to save watched from the corner, paralyzed by the terrifying aura Hiroto now radiated. Hiroto didn't even glance back at her, his focus entirely on the dungeon boss emerging from the depths. A gargantuan ogre lord stepped out, wielding a club made from the bones of previous hunters. To Hiroto, this boss was nothing more than a common ant compared to the angels he once fought. The ogre swung its club, but Hiroto caught the massive weapon with a single bare hand. With a surge of necrotic power, he shattered the bone club into 1,000 fragments. He drove his blackened blade through the ogre's throat, ending the fight in a single surgical strike. A level-up notification flooded his vision, the numbers jumping from 1 to 20 in a matter of seconds. He noticed a small glowing gem dropped by the ogre, pulsating with an unusual rhythmic beat. As he touched it, a vision of a laboratory filled with sleeping soldiers flashed through his mind. This dungeon wasn't a natural occurrence, it was a curated trap designed for a specific purpose. The adrenaline began to fade, and Hiroto felt the heavy toll of the resurrection on his still weak body. A loud mechanical voice boomed throughout the dungeon, announcing the arrival of a cleaning crew. He heard the heavy thud of tactical boots approaching from the entrance of the boss room. These weren't hunters, but highly trained soldiers carrying specialized containment equipment. Hiroto hid in the shadows behind a pillar, clutching the glowing gem tightly against his palm. He watched as the soldiers examined the ogre's corpse with scanners, whispering about an unauthorized anomaly. One of the soldiers turned his head toward Hiroto's hiding spot and raised a device that began to beep uncontrollably. Hiroto remained perfectly still as the soldier's detection device wailed with a piercing electronic screech. He realized the time for hiding had officially come to a bloody end. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged forward before the soldier could even scream for backup. The necrotic energy in his veins surged, snapping the soldier's rifle like a dry twig. As the remaining guards fled, Hiroto stepped out of the dungeon into the blinding light of the city. News of his survival spread like wildfire, leading him directly to the National Hunter Mock Battle Arena. He stood in the center of the stadium, surrounded by elite A-rank students who sneered at his F-rank badge. A top-ranked student lunged at him with a flaming sword, confident in an instant victory. Hiroto didn't even flinch, as the blade stopped centimeters from his throat, caught between two of his fingers. The air in the stadium grew heavy as his Demon Lord aura began to manifest in the physical world. Cracks spiderwebbed across the concrete floor beneath his feet from the sheer pressure of his soul. High in the VIP box, the Prime Minister leaned forward, his eyes widening behind his spectacles. The leader of the nation realized that the ranking system he had built was becoming obsolete before his eyes. Hiroto flicked his wrist, sending his opponent flying across the stadium and through a reinforced wall. He turned his gaze toward the cameras, speaking directly to the millions watching the broadcast. He declared that the era of weaklings hiding behind ranks was officially over. The Prime Minister signaled his guards to bring the boy to his chambers immediately. Minutes later, Hiroto walked into the grand office, showing no fear toward the most powerful man in the country. The Prime Minister offered him a position as the head of a new elite task force. Hiroto simply laughed, stating that he did not take orders from mortals anymore. The guards in the room reached for their weapons, but the Prime Minister stopped them with a sharp look. Instead of a master, the Prime Minister proposed a partnership to save Japan from the looming US rank gate. Hiroto scanned the documents, sensing the massive surge of dark mana coming from the gate's location. He knew that this gate held the very enemies who had betrayed him in his past life. He accepted the deal on one condition: he would have absolute authority over every hunter in the field. The Prime Minister nodded slowly, signing the executive order that granted Hiroto godlike power. Hiroto flew toward the S-rank gate, leaving a trail of purple fire across the evening sky. Thousands of monsters poured out of the rift, but they stopped in their tracks when they felt his presence. Hiroto landed in the center of the monster horde, his feet shattering the asphalt. He raised his hand, summoning a massive sword made of pure shadow and necrotic soul fire. With a single horizontal swing, he vaporized the first wave of 10,000 monsters. The sky cleared as the darkness of the gate was consumed by Hiroto's superior power. He walked back through the silent streets where citizens were emerging from their shelters in awe. He saw the friends he had protected in the beginner dungeon, safe and sound among the crowd. Hiroto realized that his new life as a human was not just about revenge, but about building a legacy. He was no longer just the demon lord of the past, but the sovereign of the future. The world's leaders gathered to sign a treaty that recognized him as the supreme protector of Earth. His F-rank tag was replaced with a unique, glowing black and gold crest that signified his ultimate status. The betrayal of the past was finally balanced by the loyalty of his new world. Hiroto Ajima closed his eyes, finally finding the peace he had sought through 2 lifetimes.